Hello, welcome back to the Future Nerd. And in our previous session, we have created our first .NET Web API, and we were using code-first database approach. And now we are going to learn about Entity Framework Core and its Fluent API. So its Fluent API is just the methods that Efcore has exposed us to configure our database configuration, and we can override the configuration that Efcore is managing, and we can override these configurations by overriding its methods. Let's see how we can achieve this. Let's say we have this project that we had created in our last session, and we want to make some changes to the database table that the entity framework had created for us, but we want some validations and we want to change the names in our database but not in our actual model class. Let's say we want to create the database column project name instead of name in database and project status instead of status in the database column. So there comes the entity framework Fluent API into the picture, and it would help us to change this configuration. Let's see how we can achieve this. We have to override its own model creating method. Override on model creating, and it would take the parameter, it would return nothing, and it would take the parameter model builder, and it would be model builder. And now we have to define the configuration for our database table model builder, and we would define the entity type. What would be the entity that we are going to manage? It would be the project. And then we want to change the property column in database, and that property would be, let's go to the new line, and its property would be p dot name. It would has column name as project name, and then it would has some string length as length, max length, that would be 20 characters. Dot has min length, there is no parameter for min length. So we can use all of these methods to override the configurations in our database that it would be required, is required, because no project would be the empty name. That's it. And then we will call the base method of that parent class dbContext, and we would pass this configuration to the base class function base on model creating and creating. What is model creating? Model creating Let's see what the error is. Cannot change the access modifier. It would be protected. And that's it. We can have configuration for all of the DB sets or the tables that we have defined in our database. We can repeat this again for other entities, like we have project 2 or tasks, any of the entity that we want to change the configuration for. We have to use this. Okay, that's it. And now let's say we want to have the task in the project, and we will create a project class, a task class, sorry. We will create a task class that will create the task table in the database for us, and it would have ID, it would have name and the status. And this project and tasks are related, and every project can have multiple tasks, but one task would be the child of the parent, would be the children of the project. Let's say every project would have multiple tasks, and every task would have one project, and we have to define the relationship between project and tasks. And we know we can have multiple tasks in a project. Task, it would be the list, and then tasks, that would be get setable, and every task would have one project that is related to that task, and we would define the project ID here, prop int and project ID. We will move this to the new file, and now we will define this in our DB context as well, task, and that would be tasks. This task is ambiguous between application model task and system data task. Okay, I have to use this API data dot models dot tasks, and now we will define the configuration for task as well. Task, and that would be models dot task. Because we have task in the dotnet library as well, so it is getting confused what is the task, or whether it is the task that we have defined in our models or it is defined in dotnet library. So we have to specify the namespace as well. So we are defining it, we are referring to the task that is in the namespace models. So it would have task name in the database, and task length could be 100 characters long, and task name is required. and we can have another property. We have to repeat this for other property. Let's say it is status and we want to store some default value in the task. Status column has default value that is false. It would not have max length, it is not required, and we will repeat this again for the task as well. And now we have to define the relationship between project and task. So every project would have multiple tasks, so we will define the relationship between them. I will copy paste this, and the project would have many tasks, has many x goes to x dot tasks dot with one x goes to x dot project. So project would have many tasks and task would have one project. So we have defined the relationship between project and task as well. So now we have to add a migration, add migration that would track the history of our database changes. I would name it edit task table, and that's it. Now I would have to update the database as well. Update dash database. So I am writing these commands in package manager console. You can open this from tools and then you get package manager, then package manager console. So now if you open the database in any IDE that you love to use, then you can see that we have two tables in our database, project and tasks, and the project has column project name and status. Tasks have the name task name, and then we have updated the database. Now if I want to use multiple tables like 50 or 20 tables, then we have to add this configuration again and again. So we want to, this method would become very long and it would be difficult to understand where is all the configuration for project and where is all the configuration for other models as well. So we can use the interface entity type configuration that would help us to separate the configuration for each model. So let's implement this and you would see that we will have a simple function here. Let's create a new folder. New folder, configurations, and in that class, in that folder, we will create configuration for each model in a separate class. I would create a class project configuration and I would implement the interface entity configuration, and I would use project class to implement the configuration. I will use this, what is the name, entity type configuration. So I will implement this, implement the interface, and now you will be able to define the configuration for each model in a separate file. It has, I will copy paste this configuration and will cut this and paste it in the project configuration. And now we don't want to specify the entity because we are managing a single entity here. We have defined the project, so we will remove this and I will use this builder, and that's it. Now we will copy paste this same for task configuration. I will copy paste this again. I will write task configuration, and that would be models dot task. I will copy paste the configuration for task as well and put it here. And then I will repeat this. I will remove this. And now you can see that we have defined the configuration in separate classes. Instead of defining all the configuration in a single method, here now we have to define from where we will get this configuration for our model builder in Efcore. So we have to give it an assembly, like we will be using this from assembly, apply from assembly, and we have to pass the assembly reference to that method. So we will get the assembly variable assembly equal to get type dot assembly. It would return us the assembly of the current project, that is API, and we will pass this to our method, and that's it. If you have defined this configuration in any other project, then we have to pass the assembly of that project to that method so that it can apply the configuration from these files that we have defined. You will see that in our clean architecture session we will change this to another, we will store these configurations in another project. So how we will access this from any other project. So now you can see that the code is much clean and it is doing the same that we have in our configuration folder. So let's say there is another use case that you want to store the created and updated date for the project. Oops, sorry. Prop date time, and that would be created date and updated date. And we can have these properties for project as well, but I would not recommend this because we can shift this to a base class or an interface. So we will override the save changes method, and in save changes method I will add the code snippet. What this code snippet do is it is getting the, and it is enabling the change tracker, and it is getting the entities that are being updated or added. And one more thing, that it is auditable, that I have defined auditable interface, and that interface is being implemented by the task model and the project model as well. So if the entity type is auditable, or if the entity is implementing this interface, then we are going to add the updated date, and we are going to add the created date if it is being added. And for updated, on the create time, it is also getting updated for the first time, so we will not check if this entity is being updated there. So now if I run this application, you would be able to see that if I try it out and get the data for the entity for the project ID 4, it is being added the default created and updated date time. So we will update the entity with ID 4, and we will update same values, and the ID is 4. Let's execute this, and it is updated, and then you would be able to see that the updated date is added that entity and we now we don't have to add created date or updated date for our models every time it is being added or updated, like this datetime.utc now. And now we have shifted this code in the save changes method that is there, and now we don't have to add the created date and updated date every time we are going to update or create a new object for that class. So that's it. We have defined the model configuration in our separate files using entity type configuration, and in the next lecture we will discuss the Swagger OpenAPI documentation.